You've heard the phrase, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard that, but the truth is, words can leave scars that last a lifetime.
Welcome back to the Touch My Health podcast. My name's Matt.
I'm Katie. Many people dismiss words as harmless, yet childhood verbal abuse, name calling, humiliation, constant criticism can really shape how we see ourselves for decades. In this episode, we're going to unpack how damaging words can be and why they're often overlooked and how to heal from them.
Yeah, verbal abuse in childhood is often brushed off as tough love or
Hmm.
I'm just disciplining my kid, but research shows it can be a lot more damaging than physical abuse. Like we've said, black eyes and bloody lips go away, but that mental really stays with you.
Yeah, you may not, and not to say one is really worse than the other,
No,
but for, and I'm sure in childhood, physical abuse is very detrimental, but there are studies that show the verbal abuse has more of a long-term lasting effect.
definitely.
Um,
I can attest to that.
yeah, and it does hurt. Words hurt.
They can definitely be long lasting as far as words that maybe you don't like or words that are triggering for you,
Mhm.
and we'll get into that. But my first question is, what is verbal abuse and how's it different than simply being strict or being tough?
Well, so when I think of being strict or tough, I still think it comes from a place of love. It comes from a place of compassion. You are with your child, we're trying to help get them to be good human beings,
Right.
functioning adults as they get older. So you have to be strict to also protect them from themselves because
Hmm.
children will do whatever they want. They have no fear of consequence sometimes or repercussion. But verbal abuse, I think the difference is that doesn't come from a place of love or compassion. It comes from a place of frustration and anger
Hmm.
and not knowing how to either communicate or just lashing out. And so they feel like, well, I'm not hitting, I'm just, or they think that it's going to cause fear and fear will make you do what I want you to do, which is something I don't agree with. I don't know if I think we've talked about that, but I don't agree with making your children fear you as a way for them to listen and not do something that they're not supposed to. As far as that being the entire,
Your
like,
entire tactic of
right.
parenting.
Because you can get over that fear, you
Right.
know.
Yep. And as you get older, you start to address that fear head on
Hmm.
most times.
Yeah, but if you have respect for your
You ever
parents, you won't
try
do it.
you ever try to fight your parents?
No, no.
I thought I was brave one time. That fear that I got over that fear when I was about, I don't know, 15, 16, and thought I could, yeah, toughen up. And
Yeah, no, no.
yeah, my pops looked at me like, bro, what are you doing? So
He said,
yeah.
no, I'm just
I
kidding.
and I don't agree with it either. I don't think making a fear tactic as your main source of discipline.
Hmm.
We talked about this with a friend of yours whose significant other was disciplining the child. And really what it boils down to is that fear in time will stop that child or stop somebody coming to you in a time of need. So there's a lot of repercussion to that fear long
Hmm.
term.
Resentment, build resentment. Yeah, absolutely. I remember what you're talking about now, where the it was just screaming. And I think when I think of verbal abuse too, I mean, yes, name calling, harsh criticism, not
Mhm.
constructive criticism, harsh criticism,
Yep.
but also just screaming and yelling. And I think as parents, that's no one is, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Everyone's going to do that. There was a word I was trying to think of, didn't come to my mind. I think most parents do that. Most parents are going to have a point where they scream and yell, raise their voice when they
Yep.
don't mean to.
Yep.
I know I've done it.
Guilty.
Guilty.
Yep.
So, but if it's a constant, like that's your only way of communicating or disciplining, or you're just being nasty and ugly. I mean, I've heard stories of children being told by their parents or their caregivers that, they're fat or they're ugly or
Oh yeah.
passive aggressive comments that make them have confidence issues or,
And that shit's not okay. That's
yeah,
just
no, that's never okay.
that's distasteful in
Yeah.
itself. Like that Netflix documentary of
Oh my gosh.
the teenage girl that was getting bullied by her own mom, and the mom was telling
Oh,
her to kill herself. Like when in
I still think that is verbal abuse, even though it was
oh,
through text.
100%.
That,
100%.
what is that called again? Unknown Number. If you haven't watched it, I mean, we just spoiled it kind of, but
Yeah,
go
but
watch it.
it was brutal the words that this lady was telling her own daughter,
Yeah.
and she was hiding behind a fake name or a fake number, but it was wild. So
So do I think we got off on a tangent, but basically
yeah.
verbal abuse and how it's different from being strict or tough. I think it's where they come from. Strict, tough comes from a place of love, compassion, and I think
Yes.
verbal abuse just comes from a place of anger and frustration where you don't know or care to properly articulate yourself.
Right. And as a parent or as an adult, you have to be able to compartmentalize that moment of anger. And if you need
Tuck
to,
it down.
yeah, if you need to take a break, then tell that person,
Yeah.
tell the child or whomever that you need to step away because you might say some
Hmm.
things that are going to be hurtful and you don't want to do that. And there's been many of times where my daughter and I did that. She either had to step away or I had to step away. And I mean, there's a lot of trying times raising teenagers. We know that.
Yes, especially teenage girls. Woo.
Yeah.
And I would like to say too that I know there's the thing called gentle parenting.
Hmm.
That's,
Yep.
like, okay, Timmy, I understand you're kicking and screaming and throwing a tantrum, and I'm going to let you do that and express yourself and blah, blah, blah. No,
Right.
no, I'm sorry.
Time and
That's
place.
when the strict and tough,
Hmm.
you know.
Yep.
So we're not saying don't be, just for full transparency, we're not saying don't be strict or tough, but, uh, don't just placate and let them do whatever they want because
Yep.
you're afraid you're going to
And
come across as verbally abusive or something.
don't be verbally abusive out of your own anger.
Hmm.
Because again, as an adult, you should be able to handle the situation in an adult manner as you would in a professional environment. And that's kind of how
Hmm.
I think of it. Why do you think society downplays the impact of words?
Because it can't be seen. If I punch you in the face,
Yeah.
you're gonna have a black eye, or maybe not. I
Right.
don't know how hard
Yeah,
I
there'd be
punch,
a mark for
but
sure.
you can't be seen. So, and I think there's the credibility is not there when someone says, or when you see someone who has been physically abused. I mean, they've been beat or
Hmm.
sexually abused. That is more, I guess, tangible in a sense, where I think that's why words aren't as impactful and society really downplays verbal abuse, mental abuse,
Yes.
because it's harder to physically see. That's my opinion. I
Yeah.
do think we are getting better at bringing awareness to that and not downplaying it, but why would you agree or do you think?
Oh, 100% I agree. And I think that's I mean, what my experience has been is nobody saw the verbal abuse that I was taking. Nobody actually saw the physical abuse that I
Yeah.
was taking. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot more of the verbal that I remember than the physical beatings that I took. For
Yeah.
sure. They stick with you longer, and because people can't see inside your mind. It's one of the reasons that we have this podcast is to bring awareness to this.
Mhm.
And I think that society downplays it because, like you said, it's intangible. You can't see it. And
Right.
people are going to call you soft, or they may
Yeah,
call me soft, or whatever, because there's certain
because you're a man.
words. Yeah, because I'm a man, or because there's certain words that are triggers for me, and we'll get into that in a minute, but they can't see the impact of the
Hmm.
verbal abuse. It's
And
not physical.
and the verbal abuse too, it might be the same for physical, but I feel like you'll develop different habits. You'll develop a different way of thinking and conducting your life probably through different habits or outlets that maybe with the physical abuse you don't, as a way to hide it and cope with it and things like that.
Yep.
What are some examples of phrases or patterns from childhood that you remember stuck with you?
The biggest one that I can remember that is still, like I was saying about trigger words, being called stupid. I got called stupid so much in my childhood from my mother. It was everything that I did. I mean, you're just stupid. You're an idiot. I mean, just
I
that,
just cannot imagine saying that to my child. Like
right?
it blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. To her, I must have been some just schmuck off the street or something. I don't know. But every time there was any type of conflict, that was the first thing that came out of her mouth is how stupid could you be? You're so stupid. Just that verbal attack
Hmm.
on my character and my mental, like,
Well, you're a kid.
right.
You're a kid,
Yeah.
and this is your mother. You're in, we're wired and born to love our caregivers as we hope they are us. But hearing you're stupid or you're an idiot, yeah, I mean that's no child wants to hear that from their parent.
Right. Yep. And a lot of mine was verbal, followed up by physical abuse. We've talked about it in our other podcasts that the abuse from my mother through my teenage years was mostly physical, but a lot of it was verbal also. There was just times where I was attacked verbally first, and
Mhm.
then the hitting came.
I feel like if you're getting physically abused, verbal abuse, it like they go hand in hand. Like you
It,
can be verbally abused without being physically hit,
mhm.
but I can't see where you would be getting physically abused and not being, you know, they're not like sitting there, listen, I'm gonna beat you up
Right.
because
Yeah,
you're
that's been
talking
my
all nice.
right. That's been my experience is that the verbal came along with the physical. So are there patterns of
I
uh
don't know, I guess patterns or things that stuck with you. So maybe like if you see or hear something, I know the stupid is a trigger word,
mhm. Yeah.
but if you hear or see something that not necessarily just a word, like a actionable behavior.
Mm-mm.
I
Nothing
think
I
of
can think
like
of.
people being passive aggressive.
Oh, patterns of passive aggressiveness. Yeah.
Yeah, that was something that came to mind.
Yeah.
I didn't, when I look back on my childhood, I don't, there's nothing from my childhood from my parents that I could say, like, I think they did the best job that they could. There's nothing that they did to me that like gave me childhood trauma that I can think of. If anything, any of my childhood trauma came from somebody else, not my parents.
Listening to them
So,
fight.
yeah, I mean, when I was little, like I would say 10 and under, when my dad had a bad drinking problem, um, and him and my mom would fight uh, and argue and scream. Yeah, and I remember waking up and just screaming at the top of my lungs to tell them to stop.
Yep.
But that was really it. Like,
That's,
and then that stopped.
yeah,
Um,
that's still a traumatic
you know,
experience. I mean, that can build into childhood
mhm.
trauma, like you don't like being yelled at now.
Right. But I think because my dad changed and like, I mean, because it didn't continue into my teen years, I don't think it had as much of an impact on me. I'm like when I think about things that have impacted me in my life, childhood trauma does not come up. I mean, yes, that is definitely probably part of the reason why I don't like being yelled at, but it definitely didn't help that my marriages followed that pattern.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I knowing me, I shut down.
Subconscious
Hmm.
mind, it definitely
Yeah.
stuck with you. How do you think verbal abuse shows up later in life, like in your relationships or career choices, or even the way that you talk to yourself?
So when you say ways that it, or how does it show up, do you mean like we or you or me or the person is being verbally abusive
Yeah,
or how we see it from,
as the victim, yeah.
well, it can definitely show up in later in life in relationships because if you're used to verbal abuse, and that's how you grew up, that's the household you grew up in,
Hmm.
you probably developed those same habits.
Yep.
You didn't learn effective communication. You didn't learn constructive criticism and
Conflict resolution.
conflict resolution.
Hmm.
So, unless you have taken it upon yourself to break that cycle and understood that how you were spoken to was not appropriate and was not the right way, then yeah, it's definitely going to show up later on in your relationships. I think in career choices, it could be something to where maybe you can't hold a job. Um, Nothing's ever your fault, or it's always somebody else. You don't outwork anyone. You just do the bare minimum because you're like, what's the point, anyways?
Yeah.
Um,
And you're probably never in a leadership role.
hmm
Or if you are, you're a mirror image of what you grew up with. So you're probably that verbally abusive type of leader, or could
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, that's true too. And self-talk, I would imagine you don't have the best self-talk.
Self-esteem is
Yeah.
probably
Self-esteem,
lower than it should be.
self-compassion,
Yep.
self-worth, absolutely.
Hmm.
I feel like you have to either know and make a conscious effort and decision that you want to break that cycle. Like we talked about before with breaking, generational cycles of abuse in any form.
Yes.
You have to say, okay, I'm not going to let this dictate how I live my life, how I look at myself, affect my relationships. I know it's not normal. I know it's not right. I'm going to break it. If you
Hmm.
don't have that mentality and that thought process, in my opinion, you're going to fall into whatever cycle you grew up with. That's the cycle you're going to fall in.
You are going to continue it,
Yeah.
and it could lead to from generation to generation if
Mhm.
you choose not to stop it.
Yeah, and it's sad too because sometimes people don't. It's one of those where like you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes people don't always have the best moral compass.
Yep.
And so, because they don't even know an alternative, there's no desire to try to change that behavior. They just are stuck in the mentality that this is just how life is. This is
That's their normal.
this is my normal. This is how
Yep.
everybody is.
Yep.
Um, you know, and and that's that.
Yeah, and not doing research into the why or how to be better. And really, for me, breaking the generational curse of the physical abuse and the verbal abuse came with my own experiences. And I was like, I'm just not gonna not going to continue that.
Yeah.
And I think really for me that was a big turning point for my life when my daughter was born. It was that memory of all of the bad shit in my childhood that I never wanted my daughter to experience. So if you've been through it, that's where you've got to flip that switch and turn that abuse off and let your childhood be a learning for
Your child's childhood.
for the next generation. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think victims often like minimize what they've experienced? So someone who's a victim of verbal abuse, why do you think they would minimize what they experienced?
In my experience, I minimized it because of society, really. I mean, we were told not to talk about it, or that was just the mentality of society is you just take it and move on.
Hmm.
And I never talked about my abuse publicly until our podcast. And it has been eye-opening for myself and hopefully for our audience that there's coming back from it. And the reason that I minimized it was because I didn't have the platform or didn't feel like I was ready to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think people minimize it too because, like you said, it's their shame, maybe, or they feel like it
Yeah.
wasn't.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, they compare it to something else that's worse. Well, I didn't, this didn't happen to me, or I didn't get physically beat up, or I didn't do this. So,
At
and
least I didn't
yeah,
die. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
just compare a bad situation to a worse situation and try and talk yourself out of feeling, letting yourself feel the things that you need to feel and minimizing it.
Yep.
Um,
And I think that the shame can really play a huge role in the way that you silence your abuse. You
mhm.
don't necessarily want to talk about it because you're afraid of what other people might think about you or what other people might say back to you when you start expressing about your verbal abuse. Because again, like we said, it's not tangible. It's verbal. And I can see where people are coming from with that shame and silencing themselves, but we're here to tell you to talk about it
Yeah.
because it can really do a lot for your own mental health and has done for mine being able to publicly speak about it. It's tough. It's not it's not easy.
No, and I mean, shame does play um, a role in, people staying silent about verbal abuse
Mm.
because you feel like, oh, it's, you know, either you feel like maybe you're shameful because you feel like you deserved it or it wasn't that bad and you don't want people to call you a whiner or
Yeah,
say that you're complaining over nothing or,
right. Hmm.
but if it affected you in a negative way and it made you develop bad habits or bad patterns and you find yourself repeating them, or it's just not impacted your life in a positive way, then don't feel shameful about it.
Yep.
It has
Wasn't your
been,
fault for
yeah, it
sure.
wasn't your
It
fault.
wasn't my fault that I was verbally abused. It was my mother's lack of compassion
Mhm.
and
Well, and probably her abuse. I mean, you
oh,
said she had a generational curse that she passed down because she did not know how to get out of that.
correct.
And she passed it down to her youth. Well,
Yep.
tried to.
Yep.
Um, which actually is a good point to the next question is what are some signs someone might still be carrying a wound from verbal abuse from their childhood,
I
just
think
like that.
not being able to communicate healthy, if everything turns into a screaming match, If you cannot have healthy conflict resolution and you just start lashing out every time somebody disagrees with something you say, like if you were to come to me and be like, "Hey, I didn't like when you, said something," and I immediately attacked you, not because of what you said, but because that's a trigger for me.
You're getting defensive. You're used to
Correct.
being defensive and
Yep.
hearing verbal abuse. I think always being defensive is one of those patterns or bad habits that you probably develop as a defense mechanism, to the verbal abuse. So when you start to receive some sort of criticism or something like, hey, I didn't like this, even if it's calm, constructive, you're immediately defensive and then you start lashing out.
Hmm.
I think that is a good example of a wound that's still there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And there were times where with kids my own age where I was doing that. I was displaying those signs. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I came to realize some of my conflict resolution was not good.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you carried some probably bad habits and bad
Oh,
patterns through
yeah.
your early 20s until you
Yeah.
realized, like,
Yeah. I
whoa.
didn't I didn't communicate effectively with my ex-wife at all. And it was because of things that were out of my control or things that I didn't know at the time
Hmm.
how to verbalize my thoughts because like you said, I was always on the defensive.
Hmm.
And as soon as I get put on the defensive, my automatic reaction used to be just to lash out or to be not not uncommunicative, but to not communicate in a good way.
Right. Yeah. I think I did that a lot in my relationships, but mine started out with being like very condescending towards me or just yelling.
Yeah.
So to me, it was just
Yeah. And there's,
bad
I mean, there's
communication.
there's still times where I can't even talk to my oldest brother because him and I just cannot communicate. We can't communicate to this day on a healthy level, and there's a lot there's a lot of things behind that.
Hmm.
But, it sometimes it still pops its ugly head up for sure. In me,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to uh maybe those closer relationships where my brother and I just have not been able, my oldest brother and I just have not been able to, I guess, hash that out.
Right. Yeah. And that's tough. I mean,
Yeah.
you can do your part, but the other person has to do their part too. If you are recognizing it and putting an effort in to communicate effectively and not let that wound keep opening up and creating a bad habit, like you're only one person, the other person has to do that too.
It's true. And, recognizing that pattern in myself was the first step of my healing because I had to recognize my weakness and then go through therapy and figure out why this is the way that I react to certain situations. And through that, through the therapy sessions and talking, I realized that I was still carrying a lot of this weight of the
Hmm.
verbal abuse, not only the verbal, but the physical, but mostly carrying that weight of the things that people couldn't see.
Well, yeah, the patterns you were carrying
Yep.
all the patterns and the behavior that you learned.
Hmm.
That's what you learned.
Yep. And now I'm having to unlearn them as an adult,
I think you've done a good job.
well, thanks, babe. I'm not perfect. I'm still working daily. I
Mhm.
mean, there's still times, like I said, that uh, I don't react the best way, and being able to recognize those moments. Like the other day, when you and I had our little tiff, I was like, "Hey, look, I apologize. I didn't mean for it to come out that way, but what you said was a trigger for me."
Yeah.
Right?
Hmm.
Like it's sometimes it's still it still rears its ugly head, but
Yeah.
in that moment you have to be able to recognize that pattern in yourself and understand why you reacted that way, because you might be, like myself,
Hmm.
carrying that trauma from your own childhood.
Yeah, but at least you recognize it, because if you were someone, like, play that scenario again, and when I came to talk to you about it, if you didn't understand it and recognize it and know, your first reaction would be to immediately get defensive, probably yell or get loud,
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
respond to me the way that you did. So you're great, baby, doing good.
Oh, thanks.
I mean, I've had to learn a lot with communication because I did not have healthy communication. And mine didn't really stem from my childhood, I don't think. Mine was more from my relationships, but it was definitely still that could have gone a whole different way for me too,
Yeah.
in a past life
100%.
from the get-go.
Yeah, it definitely can, and it can affect all of your relationships, not just intimate ones. It can affect friendships and work relationships. I mean, it can really take a toll on your whole world if you let it. So in your experience, what are some of the first steps that someone can take to start that unlearning, start that healing process?
Well, the first one is recognition. You have to recognize that there's a problem. You have to recognize that how you speak is not the best. And where does that come from?
Mhm.
And if, say, you haven't gotten there yet, you have to recognize that how you were spoken to, or how someone treated you verbally,
Mhm.
was not right. It was not, effective. Didn't come from love. It came from anger, frustration,
Yep.
their own lack of communication, or whatever generational abusive curse they're trying to keep going. So I think recognition is the first thing. You have to recognize that there's a problem, either
Yep.
that you're doing or that's being done to you.
Yes. Yep, because if you are the victim of that, it's not your fault, but there's a time where you have to speak up and say,
Yeah, this is
this
not okay.
not okay.
Yeah.
And then address that with
Mhm.
the person.
And then I think another good step would be to establish boundaries.
Ooh,
If someone's being verbally abusive to you, and this is hard as a child. I mean, I can't imagine as a child having the thought, I need to set boundaries. You don't even
no
really
idea.
understand what boundaries are.
No idea what that
So
is. Yeah.
it's hard, but I think when you get older too, maybe into teenage years or early adulthood, if you recognize it and then set those boundaries. And it's hard when it's family. I know we have friends. There's one person I'm thinking of who told us, she had to pretty much like cut her dad off because she got to a point where she just recognized, like, this is my boundary and you continuously cross it. You don't talk to me in a nice way. You're just, and when I say in a nice way, it's not like, I don't want to sound soft when I say that. Like, really mean, not just
Yeah.
you're doing a bad job,
Yeah.
like hurtful words and things that don't need to be said.
Yep.
I don't know how better to describe that without just saying you're being mean. I don't,
I think that's the perfect way to describe it. I mean, if somebody is,
yeah, but I'm not saying just because someone's mean to you, don't talk to them. That's a family member. I mean,
well, yeah,
like,
but if you've set that boundary like she did, then
mhm,
that's a line that is constantly
mhm,
being crossed, and overstepping that
yeah.
boundary is a sign that it's going to continue to happen.
Yeah, but I think setting boundaries is a good, with recognition, setting boundaries,
Yes.
you know, those are, I think, the two biggest things you can do to either heal from the verbal abuse. And as we always recommend, therapy. I
Yep.
mean, I think we say that in every episode, therapy.
Yeah. It's helped me.
It's,
It's helping you.
you know,
Yeah.
um,
It's certainly a great tool
yeah.
to utilize.
And there's also, I don't even know why I didn't like say this or think about it before, but there's so many tools online as far as, books or support groups, even when it comes to any type of abuse that you can draw materials from to help build new habits and kind of heal from those abuses without going to a therapist. Like if you were just, I do not want to sit down and talk to somebody. I'm not comfortable. Maybe do some, yeah,
That
maybe
was
do some self-help first and
Yep.
find some tools online, some books, self or help group, something to get you a little bit more comfortable to maybe take that step.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, that's been our take on verbal abuse. As important as it is to address it, it's also important to heal from it. Leave a comment below if you like this and want to hear more or have some comment to add to our topic. And again, we link all of our social medias in the description below, and we'll see you on the next one.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. Thank you for joining us today. If you learned something and our stories resonate with you, subscribe to our podcast. That's a zero-cost way to support our channel. You can also follow us on Spotify, Instagram, and TikTok. They're linked in the description of the episode. We'd love for you to put any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes in the comment section on YouTube. We'll read them all. Again, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your interest. And as always, we remind you to be the best version of yourself. See you next time on the Touch My Health podcast.